very happy to say hello to Dr. Simeon Hein and Bobby from Bulgaria. Dr. Simeon Hein, he's from Colorado, and he been twice our guest in UFO Disclosure Bulgaria, and now again. And I'm really very happy to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me today again. Appreciate
and
it.
Bobby, we met maybe a few months ago, and we became very good friends so far now. And we learn each other from his experience, from my experience. His father actually is very sensitive person, and he is a contactee, and he have ability for remote viewing, and he received that gift, I think, by natural way. But Bobby, eventually, he can share more about this. So let's, Dr. Simeon Hein, would you like to introduce yourself with few words?
Yeah, well, I started researching in this area about 25 years ago. I took a remote viewing class in 1996. Almost seems like prehistory now. Yeah, and it really opened my attention up to a lot of topics that I hadn't learned about in graduate school. I was a statistics teacher at Washington State University, and I just came across this topic of RV, remote viewing, and I initially was very skeptical. I mean, I hadn't heard about it before, and I didn't think that this was necessarily real, but I thought I should take the class and make my mind up, taking the class and looking at results. And I did. I went to the Farsight Institute in '96 back then. They were teaching classes, and I was really surprised that I was able to get results that seemed to show that people had some sort of, non-local sensory ability. They're perceiving things that are not directly in front of their physical senses. And that topic led me to other sorts of topics like crop circles. We did view a crop circle, one crop circle in one of the classes. And I back in 1996, I didn't even know what a crop circle was. And I decided to go to the UK for myself. I like to see things for myself, Yvonne. I like to see it and touch it and make my own mind up. It would be great if we could do that with a UFO. Just go walk around and touch the buttons or whatever. I like to do this. I went to UK with a guy named Ron Russell, who gave crop circle tours in 1997, a year later. And again, I found that this was not just urban legend or folklore. There were strange things that would happen around crop circles. I didn't get to see them made in front of my eyes, but I could see that when you go in, your watch wouldn't work properly. Now, that's not supposed to happen in this conventional reality. So that was something that I started looking. Why would swirled shapes in wheat or other grain crops affect electronic devices? I used to build electronic kits as a kid. You'd solder the parts together, you'd make radios and things. We have a store here in the US called Radio Shack. You could get these kits, and with my paper route money from delivering papers, I would buy these kits and put them together. I knew how electronics worked. There was nothing about wheat that should cause your camera to stop working. I knew that. So this topic led to interest in UFOs because you get these UFO sightings around crop circles. So one topic led to the next. And I ended up writing a book about it called Opening Minds. I mean, because it opened my mind.
Yeah.
And this is how I ended up, literally looking at the science behind all of this, is what actually is going on here. And then the second part of it, Yvonne, is why is society so hesitant to investigate these topics publicly?
Looks like society is much more interesting about all this instead the scientists.
Yeah, and if it is being done with science, it's classified. And so we've had the OSAP program, we've had the so-called ATIP that Senator Harry Reid and other senators sponsored starting in 2008, but that wasn't the first program, at least here in the US.
Yeah.
And we know that the Soviet Union had their own program. So the question is, has the research been going on into these phenomena? Other phenomena related to this would be condensed matter ball lightning. It hasn't been going on, but it's been kept under the surface, or it's been hidden because it has such, perhaps, implications that it's not an open topic. But I think at this point, having done this research for 25 years, these are real topics with real scientific data. And I think for me as a sociologist, it's what is it about this that we don't want to have open public discussions as a society and anywhere in the world to a large degree. And that's what I'm interested in looking at now. I'm working on a new book, by the way, which should be out in a few months, about the relationship between these topics, and especially to some of the research that was done at Skinwalker Ranch with other types of phenomena that we call cryptids, kind of animals that seem to be able to shapeshift, things like this. These topics are connected. There's data, and I'm writing about that right now.
Instead of all of this, you're a musician.
Is it my what?
You're a musician. You create
Oh,
music?
yes, I do. I play guitar. I'm a guitar player.
I know.
I'm happy to play a song for you.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. It's even connected to music, because one of the first really great physicists that connected the topics in science, cymatics. The cymatics is the science of how sound creates shapes, and you've seen these probably on YouTube, Dr. Hans Jenny, shapes and sound. That was Ernst Friedrich Kolodny, Florence Kolodny from, I believe is from Austria, who went around Europe in the 1700s and showed that with metal plate, you could play a bow on the metal plate and create shapes in sand. And he's known as the father of acoustics. And where the cymatics is really connected to these sort of shapes, because this is what you get on metal plates when you put in sound. So really what we're learning, Yvonne, is that one of the fundamental principles that connect a lot of these topics is resonance. And I enjoy, I enjoy playing music. I played music since I was a teenager. My mom taught me how to play guitar as a teenager. Yeah. And I've been playing ever since, because it's just a great way to have fun almost for free.
So it looks like there's a lot of stuff like connecting like a chain, like remote viewing, UFO phenomena, crop circles, vibration. You said resonance of the music, of the tunes. Dr. Stephen Greer talking about that the whole universe is like orchestra with the different. Every planet have a personal vibration and tune. And I know also that you have interest about the Bigfoot.
Yes, right back there.
Yeah, I see.
I got this poster at a local festival here in Boulder, and I thought that's a very good drawing. It looks a lot like what people report. The Bigfoot is another related topic, and here's why. And this is so surprising to me, Yvonne, and to our guests.
Yeah,
people see balls of light, orbs, around Bigfoot, and I've read hundreds of case stories of people. I've talked to witnesses in this area of the Rockies, people who've seen this creature. I haven't seen it.
Right.
There are things around it that are related to resonance. Yeah. If it's just an escaped gorilla or an undiscovered primate, or maybe human, as the Russian researchers thought maybe it's a type of Neanderthal, why would you get balls of light, time loss, sort of teleportation? People get the telepathic voice in their head before they see it. To me, that is very similar to these other phenomena. It's a type of information communication that is not conventional, that has to do with the way that matter is organized. Yeah. And I think it just makes all these topics more interesting. And Yvonne, this is what they were studying in OSEP at Skinwalker Ranch through the Defense Intelligence Agency. You've heard this book, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, James Lukatsky. They were studying it too. So I'm not just making this up.
I have insiders from Skinwalker Ranch, but we'll talk about this later.
Yeah, sure.
Let's say hello to Bobby. Bobby, can
Hey,
you introduce yourself? What is your interest? What kind of phenomenon you experiences? So Dr. Simeon Hein will learn a little bit about you.
sure, yeah. So Bobby is my name again. Well, I've been experiencing since. Well, let me start a little bit earlier. As Ivan said in the very beginning, my father, he's what you call a channel. He's been having this basically contact with higher beings from around 18 years old. He's right now almost 60, so that's almost 40 years of development. And as of now, my father has a very direct, very pure, because that's pretty much important when we're talking about psychic abilities and more so a channel. So yeah, I believe there is something that I had basically during my birth, because there were a lot of sensations around my mother when I was pretty much in her belly. So I believe I had something going on before even making it to earth, before my born, before me being born. What I mean by that is I've been having and sensing all sort of sensations since I've been like very young. They started to appear a bit more when I was around 15, 16. I'm talking about maybe seeing shadows around my home, maybe hearing some things, maybe knocks on the door when nobody's home, knocks on the walls. That's something that would happen very regularly when I was back then. Right now, I'm 23, and as of now, I've pretty much experienced a development with a big magnitude in this area, because that's something that I'm constantly working on, developing my inner self, basically, because that's the root of all progress in this area. Pretty much perfecting yourself to the possibility you can, so you can perfect the connection between you and the higher world. So yeah, I've been, as Ivan said, I've been experiencing remote viewing. I've been experiencing out-of-body experience. I have quite some meetings with extraterrestrials, with higher beings. I've been able to see parts of my future. I've been able to see parts of my past, and by past I mean previous lives. And that's something that I believe every single person on this planet can do it, because within us we have this this God's fame, is the way I refer to it. But it's really an ability for us to connect with the higher dimensions, and basically being able to connect with them. And of course, this is in a big favor of us if we're able to control it and, of course, adapt to it. So that's pretty much about me. I'm a natural, as you refer to it. I haven't really worked on a lot for me to develop those kind of, let's say, powers. But yeah, I believe this is a result of many past lives that I've been working towards that goal.
That's that was a very nice beginning, and there's a lot of questions on all these topics we're going to talk today. Dr. Simeon Hein, what do you think about all this experience for this young man from Bulgaria?
No, I want to encourage him to. I like what I'm hearing, and I want to encourage Bobby to keep studying these areas. He's definitely on the right track here. And I'm listening to all these different experiences that he's talking about. And it's so interesting because they're connected. It's sort of like information that's been withheld from us in our modern society. We tend to think that we know everything because we're modern people. We have the latest, smartphones and everything. And nothing could be farther from the truth. The information that we're accessing through these non-ordinary channels it doesn't always come through technology. It comes through us.
Right.
It comes through our physiology, not just even through your mind. Like people think telepathy is this mind thing. It's some sort of resonance that comes through us, and we experience, he's talking about hearing these sounds and hearing knockings and things. I'm really convinced now that there are other realities that are around us. And
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah, and people have been studying this since the 1950s. Parallel reality. It's been
that's crazy because
yeah, go ahead.
That's absolutely mind blowing because I didn't mention, but I'm very big on law of attraction, and I'm not those sort of guys, being a fan of it. But I've been actually studying it for the past 4 years. I've been studying the laws behind it. I've been studying how exactly it works and why exactly it works. So yeah, I found one document. You probably heard of it, the Gateway project by CIA. You most certainly have.
Yeah.
And those kind of experiments, they are from the 60s, from the 70s, and as you mentioned, even before that. So it's crazy how the society have access 20 years after that it's been discovered, and I just can't get my head around it, and the progress they must have already accomplished for such a long period of time. So it's crazy how they're hiding so much stuff from us. The reason is pretty much not unknown to me, but yeah, they're keeping a lot from us, from our origin, from basically our possibilities as a human being. And that's not something that that's respectable, but I get it. But yeah, there are so many things that are being hidden of us, and I've seen it with my own eyes.
No, it's very true. Very true.
Do you think that consciousness is the center of all this phenomena, Dr. Hein?
Well, it's a good question, and I don't totally understand it yet. But what I would suggest is that it's the closest analogy I have to explaining that is when we go to see a movie, at least in the old days before COVID, when we went to movie theaters, there was this film strips, at least it used to be film, and you'd see all these film strips with the light projecting very quickly, pulsing, and it looks like a movie, and it's very convincing, but that it's one frame at a time. But you feel the emotions and we pay to go see movies because it makes us feel like we're experiencing another reality. But at the same time, it's not real, that it's actors that are being paid, right, and it's, CGI. But the experience is real. I feel like our reality is probably something like that, but a million times faster. And so what we are, if you want to say, is the consciousness. We're kind of like the light projected through the film strips, but the film can take so many variations and create so many movies. And that's kind of a good analogy for parallel realities. The multiverse is all the film strips exist simultaneously, but we're in one theater at a time, and we're convinced that's what reality is, and we're experiencing it. But the light is actually what's constant. No matter what film is playing, the light is the same. That's the closest I can come to understanding how it really works.
Yeah. The purpose of UFO Disclosure Bulgaria project is to try to wake up the human race in the planet, not only Bulgarians, but for everybody, because I think this is necessary. What else we can do to challenge the people who is watching that video and any videos like this?
Well, personally,
can I?
Oh no, go ahead, Bobby. No,
I would wish to add something to the question. That's possible.
Sure.
Yeah, something that I'm a true believer when we're talking about stuff that's not basically the humanity have accepted as of now, like those kind of sensations, and pretty much the topic of our discussion is that people that are saying I need to touch it before for me to believe it, I need to see it. Something that is pretty much possible, and I'm really trying to work it out, is to have like a solid proof that, for example, the law of attraction works. For example, when there are people that have some sort of psychic abilities that they can prove themselves that, this is true. And I've been thinking about this, how can we actually show a very solid proof? Because, when once you start studying it, you can see the proof there everywhere, right? But, for the people who haven't actually been paying attention to the topics around the world, how can you show something like, see, this is it, this is what I've been talking about, and you pretty much can't refuse or deny it? Is there anything that you're doing towards this direction? I'm pretty much interested in your answer.
Yeah, in fact, that's a really good question. I had created my own class around it that I called Human Fusion, because, and let me explain this for a second. One of the things we learned from remote viewing, which I called resonant viewing, is that there are different possible futures. And it's not fixed. And when you hear people make a prediction like this is going to happen or that's going to happen, I never believe it, because the science of multiverses tells us the future is always just a possibility until it actually happens. So there's different probabilities, but you can see in your mind ahead of time different possibilities. Now, as someone who studied Hugh Everett and the guy that invented the idea of parallel realities at Princeton in the 1950s, this is mathematically real. I believe that when you're imagining something, you see it in your mind, that's actually a real reality somewhere. It may not be real here yet, but it's real in the matrix of possibilities. So the more that you can actually imagine something happening and take action in that direction of making it happen, I think the more likelihood that it actually becomes physically real. And I did have a class in this that I teach from time to time that I called Human Fusion, just because it's to take RV, but to sort of use it to kind of imagine possibilities for yourself in a, productive, positive way. And so I think that is one way that you can actually show. There's actually two ways. One way is to look at how people that we consider to be successful in society, some way, what do they do? And if you look at a lot of these people, they use a sort of highly sensitive sensory system. To me, that sounds a lot like RV, like the one of the CEOs of Sony in Japan. He would sort of swallow decisions and see how it felt in his body, if it felt good or bad. And I know George Soros would look to how his back felt, because he would have occasional back pain. Did it make his back feel better or not? So this is sort of a little feedback from the future affecting yourself now. And so I think that's one way that you can show, Bobby, that this is actually real, is to look at how people who we consider to be successful people, what do they do? Because there's there's a whole book that was written about this called Executive ESP. And it was written by some social scientists, I think at New Jersey Institute for Technology, one of the New Jersey technology institutes in the 1960s. I have it here on my shelf somewhere. If I'd known we were going to talk about it, I would have pulled it out. And here's what they found. I'm just mentioning this, that people who they consider to be successful CEOs seem to be a little better at ESP than the average population. So that is some evidence that people that use these sort of skills tend to make, better decisions if we can evaluate their decisions. So that's one way that you can look at it, to see that the people that seem to be doing really well at what they do, are they relying on that type of intuition that we have in RV? And I think statistically that would show that there's some sort of feedback from the future. It's very subtle, but if you pay attention to it, it's almost showing you the outcomes of your actions ahead of time. And one more way that we can show this could be real. This is speculative at the moment. There's a lot of research in particle physics to show that the standard model doesn't make sense. And a result just came out about a week ago. with the so-called W boson. The measurements of the energy level of this boson predicted by the standard model, which is considered to be one of the most accurate scientific models ever invented. Well, it doesn't fit. And they kept measuring it, and it didn't fit. And at first they thought it was a mistake, but now they're sure to like 1 in millions that this is a real result. And if it's true, it means the standard model doesn't add up. And the reason that matters to us is it could suggest like Paul Dirac, one of the Nobel Prize winners from the era of the invention of quantum mechanics in the 1930s, suggested that there were antiparticles. For every particle that we can see of physical matter, there are other particles, which would suggest that they're parallel realities. So I think that's two ways you could look at it. The work that's being done in particle physics that show that it doesn't quite make sense the way the standard model, it doesn't explain dark matter, it doesn't explain gravity, that they're open questions. And now even measurements of some of these fundamental particles show doesn't add up. And at the macro level, more like at a level that we can get data from now, you can look at people who seem to be, good at making decisions. Is their ESP ability, I'm just calling it ESP. It's a bigger thing, but that's the way we refer to it. Is it slightly better than the standard average person?
So when you're talking
something,
yeah. Okay, Bob, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Something that I would like to bring to your attention is the side of my side. That, for example, if I'm trying to explain, as I mentioned, I'm big on law of attraction and how it works. When I've been talking to people about that, something that I really like giving as an example is, for example, I'm going to number a few of them. For example, charisma. What is charisma? You feel energy. You feel the energy. What is, for example, another example? Have you had a moment or a situation in your life when you're maybe walking towards your job, towards your home, and you instantly turn your head and you can see someone is watching you? All that is explaining of the energy existing, energy interacting with you. And another example, when you're hurting, maybe you have a bad belly, or maybe you have a headache. What you do? You usually put your hand on it. Why would you do that, right? This is so obvious to do because we've been doing it since our birth. But again, it doesn't explain why we do it. And the explanation is very simple. Again, energy. And when we have the ability to actually point that energy in the direction we want it, and as you've mentioned, if we track, successful people, as of now, many successful people, actors, successful CEOs, they're talking about law of attraction, and they're talking maybe not in a certain way of, yeah, this is a law of attraction, this is what I'm doing. But when you hear them describing it, this is exactly what it is. And that's sort of the examples I'm giving people, and this is how they're pretty much connecting the dots. And this has been working really well for me. That's what I sort of wanted to mention here.
Yeah. No, those are, you're mentioning all little aspects of this, which show us that there's just a bigger picture, and always, what we want is people to be able to benefit from this. It's very interesting at a scientific level. And like you, I really like to take these techniques and use it to show people that they can use these like tools in their lives for real to see a result. That's why I like teaching RV. I'll just mention we do have another, I have a class coming up in May, beginning class online, where we go 5 weeks and we go through it. Why do I like to do it? Because I didn't believe it was true either until I took a class. And it's some work, guys. You got to sit there. You don't know what the target is. And yet somehow you have described the colors and the shapes and the patterns. And when you look at the feedback picture, it's astounding. How did you do it? And to me, that just shows us, Bobby, it's another little indication there's more information coming to us that you're not conscious of, but it's there. And the point, I guess the point of it is just because you're not consciously aware that it's there doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And you can show with the data and these different projects going back, as you're saying, to the 60s, and maybe before that.
I agree. Yeah.
There's a feedback going on, and it's practical. That's, to me, I like things to be practical. When I get up on stage, I got to make the notes have to work. I can't think about it. The song has to play and it has to work. So I think that the RV shows people, it's one way, not the only way. It shows you that you have more ability than you think. I think that's exciting. I think that
It is very exciting. And yeah, I have something else to add here, but I would let Ivan ask his question because I feel like he has one.
Yeah, in another your video, Simon, you mentioned, you talking about the quantum physics, about the matter, about the this world. Now, during this conversation, something came to my mind. Do you think that, I think actually it's possible, even if I'm not super familiar with RV, but I think that if you have this ability for remote viewing, even you can do a scientific research of something which is not in that, even if it's not in that planet.
Yes.
For example, years ago, maybe more of 30 years ago in Bulgaria, we have one lady, not well educated. Her name was Slavka Severikova. I think she has that remote viewing because she worked, probably she didn't know that this is remote viewing, but she worked with some Bulgarian scientists, physicists, and she was able to describe the structure of the atom, how many electrons, protons, neutrons have over there. And the scientists just, they don't know what's going on. So the remote viewing, according to my opinion, we can use exactly like you say, like a tool. I mean, one of the tools we can have. And if we develop that ability, we can. And also, Dr. Stephen Greer also, he mentioned, many times, he said, if you develop this ability, you can say that you're free. No one can control you to manipulating you. That's so amazing.
No, I mean, what you're talking about comes across in many ways. Sometimes people get it in dreams at night. I mean, there's evidence that people have precognitive dreams. They dream of something that you may have had this happen to yourself or know of it, where you had a dream and it actually came true. Larry Dossey here in the US wrote a couple of books about precognitive experiences that people had. Even one of the people that was part of the RV program, Dale Graff, built a RV technique for sleeping while you're sleeping, to dream the target while you're sleeping. He called it dream viewing. I'm calling it dream viewing. He's been here at some of the conferences. I've actually taken his seminars and talked to him. So so my point is, there's different ways that the information can come across. And the main thing is, this is a natural ability. It's not like it's for special people. The way we all grew up is, we saw special psychics people. They had them in the Soviet Union. They had them in the US. People that seem to have been born this way with special ability to get this sort of information. And for most of us, we have to have a little training to learn how to do it. But what I think it suggests to me, Ivan, is that the information wants to come across. So in this example of this woman that I think I heard about that case where she did viewing of some atomic structure, and it could be very accurate. If you know the sewing machine, the person that invented that, I think it was it Singer or someone who, I think it was Singer. He actually had a dream of Native Americans with bows and arrows. And he saw that the arrow was reversed and the thread was going through the other side. And it gave him idea to put the thread at the bottom of the needle instead of the other side. And that's how he came up with the idea of the sewing machine. So this is an example of how inventors, when they're working on something, the information spontaneously comes through because you're working so hard at it. Again, that's one of the keys to the law of attraction, is that it takes a lot of effort initially to set the groundwork for the information to come to you. You know, you're really working on it day and day. Think of something like Nikola Tesla. I mean, he said that when he would see these inventions, they were like three-dimensional images in front of him. And they were so accurate, he could actually go just from that image and get the parts and kind of make them work. So for different people, it comes in different ways. And just as examples, I mean, what I've seen just from beginners, you can just see two examples here. Well, okay, one is look at the rocket ship. These are beginners in the class. This is just what average people can do. The rocket ship target, and then they're able to draw it, or that race car.
Mhm.
These are hidden targets that people can do. These are people, just beginners. So if beginners can do that in a 3-day class, how much can we do if every day we're devoting our focus on something and working at it, and then all of a sudden you take a break and the information comes to you in a dream, like Tesla or Singer or so many other, Kerkula, the guy that saw the structure of the carbon atom. He saw that in a dream of a snake, the Ouroboros, you know, the snake eating its tail. And it gave him the sense of this kind of ring of carbon atoms, the larger carbon molecules. He actually saw that in a dream. So the person that discovered carbon. So there's a lot of ways information can come across, and you have to kind of set it up, and then there's so many ways that the universe can deliver the information to you after that. So yeah, it's a very interesting process, and it's something that, you know, it's fascinated me for a long time.
And Dr. Simeon, what's even more fascinating, at least to me, where does this information come from? Because I've been thinking, well, you know, for example, my father, right? He has this ability to connect with higher beings, but where the higher beings are taking this information, right? For example, I don't know if you have heard about the Akashic records. They're yeah, but there are also evidence of Indian people that are having access again to some sort of Akashic records, basically able to foretell the future with simple words to every being who asks them, basically. So I've been thinking about that, and the answer I got is that there is like this informational field, is the way I call it, around Earth, which basically contains all information there is, which is again something natural for people to tap into, basically this space. And this is how we're getting our information. And something that came to me as a concept a few weeks ago is that are our thoughts really our thoughts? Like, for example, Bobby's thoughts, Ivan's thought, Dr. Simeon's thoughts, or are they being projected from maybe our higher being or someone else, from somewhere else? And that's pretty fascinating to me, because those thoughts sometimes we're getting, most people, they can differentiate them from being their thoughts, and like, for example, they came from somewhere but not from my head. And that's, I believe, is our possibility to tap into this informational field, which basically contains endless information about everything. And this is how ideas are born, in my opinion.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So Ingo Swann, the person that created the written remote viewing system, the CRV system, he called it the Matrix. And it was before the movie.
Yeah.
He imagined something like an Akashic record, and he called it the Matrix. And it was some sort of place that had all access to all information, and throughout time and space. And through RV, you would connect to that matrix and write it down. And other people have different words for it, but I think your point is a very good one. Is there's like a larger mind that's beyond our mind and our brain. You know, there's like the physical mind, which is the brain structure. And our science on the planet right now has not gone very far beyond the physical brain. But like you're saying, Bobby, when you get these ideas, it seems to come from somewhere else. Like you get this feeling like, I didn't think that. Where did that come from?
Exactly.
So yeah. And I think that there's a higher mind, whatever you want to call it. There's another mind that we have access to. And it's almost like our physical mind is very practical, but it limits our ability to perceive this higher mind information. And that's why people who sometimes get breakthrough ideas, they get it when they're not working on it. They're walking around in the shower, you know, they're taking a break. And all of a sudden, information comes through. So that's
there is this method that I've been introduced many years ago, the brainstorming method. You know, everyone probably has heard about it. You know, think something very hard about, you know, maybe solving a problem you have in your life or in your work for, let's say, 30 minutes, then take a 10-minute break. And when you come back, it's like the solution, at least in my experience, kind of, you know, it's just there. You just tap into it. I haven't actually been able to look behind how this works, but it's really something fascinating to be know and to be working, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move to Bigfoot.
Yes.
The last video I watched, I mean, I don't know if that was your last video, but was last for me when you talk with this man who is researching Bigfoot.
Yeah, Ron Moorhead. Yes.
Yes, and you play with his permission some of these sounds.
Yes.
This is very interesting.
Yeah, the Sierra sounds.
What is your, after all these years researching Bigfoot, what do you think? Is this a being coming from another dimension, another world?
And is it one being, or there are like multiple ones?
Yeah, very good questions. Listen, we don't know too much about what these creatures are, but what we know is, I mean, they're real, and these seem to exist in every country on the earth. It's not just in the US. Here we have a name, we call it Bigfoot. I don't know if that's the best name. The Australians called it Yowie, and the Chinese called it the Yeren, the wild man. And the Native American tribes in the US all had different names for this creature. Some called them Sabe. And there are hundreds of names for these creatures. They do seem to have, you know, it doesn't fit into any easy, it doesn't fit. It's like these topics we talk about here, Ivan, it doesn't easily fit into any category because there are aspects to it that connect to RV. People, if you talk to people who've experienced the Bigfoot, and you can encounter these creatures. I live near the Rocky Mountains. It's just a couple miles that way, and you're in the Rocky Mountains. People have experienced these creatures all over the United States, but especially in national parks in the mountains. But one of the very interesting things about it, Ivan, is they seem to have flesh and blood physical characteristics. You can record them talking or howling or screeching. And you heard this with Ron Moorhead's Sierra sounds, which he recorded in the 1970s, all the way up for many years. He'd go back to this very remote hunting site in the Sierra Nevadas. And these creatures would come around, and they got microphones. They got the best tape recording equipment that existed in the 1970s, physical tape. This is before the solid state record. And they recorded these sounds, which you heard on my broadcast the other day.
Yeah.
So there's this side to them where they seem like kind of a primate, like making monkey-like sounds, you know, like you would expect from a howler monkey or a gorilla. They make those sort of sounds. And yet they also have the ability to imitate human speech. They're very good at mimicking the way you sound or the way your dog barks or something. And they can actually make you think that, you know, one of your kids is out in the woods, but they're just imitating the sound. So they're very good at imitating other sounds. They have a very large vocal range. And then they have this aspect to them which seems supernatural, because people that encounter them often before the encounter, maybe the night before or a couple hours, they get speech in their mind that they describe it as telepathic, and they hear a voice talking to them. It's not physically in their ear. They say they know it's not like a sound in the room. It's a voice in their head. So, and it's telling them to do things. Sometimes it's telling them to go outside of their home and come visit. And sometimes people visit with them. People have sometimes very good relationships with them if they get to know them where they live. And other times it's attempts to trick them to do other things, like go in a different path if you're hiking, which maybe you shouldn't do. So it does relate to this discussion we're having here, because they seem to have natural telepathic abilities.
Yeah.
That science doesn't even recognize that they exist yet, let alone that they have these special telepathic abilities to project their voice into your mind. They seem to be able to levitate, because when people see them come down from a tree or a fence, they don't hit the ground very hard like you would expect something that weighs 1,000 pounds. They float down. Sometimes people see them float down. They can move at really fast speeds, easily 40 miles an hour without trying. Some people say they move as fast as a jet from not moving. It's almost so fast, guys, it's like a blur. And then if that's not enough, they can become invisible. People have seen in our country here in the US. You're in Illinois, right? Isn't that, Ivan? You're in the US.
No, I'm in Utah.
You are in Utah. Okay. They've seen them in Utah.
We're neighbors.
We're neighbors. Okay. So they've had them in the Wasatch Mountains. I've talked to people who've heard, had them come very close while they're up there having a campfire up out of Salt Lake City in the mountains up there. Their sightings there. They can become sort of transparent if that's not enough. So they have all the the abilities that we would ascribe to the supernatural. But for those of us modern people that are more interested in science, they seem to have abilities of another state of matter. And this is what Ron Moorhead, I think he's been studying the Bigfoot longer than many people in the US. I mean, he started in the 70s, right? And
yeah,
he thinks that they are paranormal creatures. You heard him in the conversation. He doesn't think they're an escaped gorilla or they're some sort of undiscovered primate. They have special abilities. It's very interesting. And I don't know all the answers, but the parallels to RV and UFOs, guys, because they're seen around where UFO sightings are. So going back to what we were talking about at the beginning today, it's like there's parallel realities around us that contain different sorts of life forms that we're not used to in our particular reality. And sometimes they come through and that's why you see UFOs at the same time, the balls of light. I just think this is a very interesting subject, and it deserves a lot more attention.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just the three of us and those interested, like Ron Moorhead. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show,
right.
The Defense and Intelligence Agency paid for, people through the OSAP program, which was a UFO study program, to go out and study these types of creatures in Utah. So obviously the government has been interested in this too.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very interesting subject. It's a very interesting subject, and I'm working on a book about it, but it raises lots of questions. And I think okay, one more thing I'll say. I think these topics are connected. People like to say, no, Bigfoot is Bigfoot. UFOs are UFOs. RV, telepathy. I don't think they're all separate topics. I think they're working with common principles, and I think it's very exciting to discover them.
Right. We're like in the jungle. I mean, there's a lot of forms of life and we just go in the jungle. We don't know what's going on there. And we meet something and then another thing. Anyway, have you heard about Navajo Rangers?
Yes.
I met them in
Oh, good.
Nevada years ago.
Mhm.
And I talked with them. I got interview. They said that they knew, they're responsible for Navajo Nation area. It's a huge land. Arizona, New Mexico.
Yeah.
And they said, we knew because they worked there for many, many years. And one of them was just retired, but the other guy is still working. They said, literally, we know any inch of this land. So they, because this is Native American police institution, they getting reports from the local residents, usually Native Americans, and they going and doing investigation. And they mention about Bigfoot. They start investigated one of these cases, and one of the guy, both of them, they say we saw the footsteps in the ground.
They disappear.
Yeah, they took they put the cement or something.
The plaster cast. Yeah.
Right. And they said that they found hair, one of the bushes, and they put for research in the lab. And the lab says that that doesn't match at all with any known DNA. So that is one kind of confirmation that that phenomenon, Bigfoot, is probably not from this world. Definitely.
Absolutely. And something that I would like to add from my personal experience, I have two similar and one very much on the point experience. That was this summer, last year summer. We were going with a friend of mine around Bulgaria, sacred places basically. And there is one spot where there was an ancient maybe like monastery or something from that kind. And what's interesting, there is like a 20 or 30 minute drive with the car after you go down from the runway. And we've been driving towards this spot. And what's interesting, because I've been very relaxed and I've been trying to record, to actually to pay attention how I feel in the situations when something is happening from this sort. So what happened is that, I'm sorry, my cat. What happened is that we're driving towards this destination, and in my head, again, as you, Dr. Simon, described it, you don't hear it as an actual voice, going around you, but you kind of hear it within your head. What I experienced is some sort of, again, telepathic, connection basically. And there was an image inside my head. Usually when I'm getting some sort of psychic, let's say, predictions or anything related to what my interest is in, I'm getting images or short movies. This is the way I'm getting information. So what happened is we're driving, and I'm getting this voice in my head greeting me basically, but not a voice that I can hear it and differentiate it from my own, but just a feeling like from greetings. And this image coming in my head, like this maybe 2 meters tall creature with this fur that you would basically describe as a Bigfoot, because I haven't seen one in person, but from the pictures, this is the image I got. It was pretty much a big head, a big hairy hair that was maybe 5-6 centimeters long, the hair coming out from his body. And when I went back, asked my father, through his channel, to ask him to see and to gather some information about that. He said he was the protector basically in this area, and he was basically saying you hi, not expecting you, because we had something to do within this area. So this was pretty much, in my opinion, on-spot experience that I had, and I didn't know about since you mentioned it today. Maybe that's some sort of a Bigfoot experience. I don't know what you think about it, but in my head, I kind of connecting dots. And the second thing I experienced that was 3 or 4 months ago. It's nothing. There is nothing to do with the Bigfoot, but it's something similar. We were again on a sacred place, and I was with my father and a friend of mine, and maybe 50 meters distance from me, I saw a wolf appearing from thin air. I swear, from nothing.
where?
Like a wolf. Like
Okay, yeah, you said that it's appeared from
yeah,
where?
but yeah, from thin air, from basically from nothing. There was we were in this forest, and there is this forest path. Basically, it's not close to me. It's maybe 50, 100 meters from me, but I can see it very well with my eyes. And as I was watching, but I didn't concentrate on the spot where he appeared or something. I was just watching the perimeter, and he appeared out of nothing, like this wolf, like a wild wolf, out of nothing, and he just passed by through this path and went again in the woods. And I was like, this is the first time something happening to me from this kind, disappearing. And again, when I asked my father, it was some sort of higher teacher that is guarding basically this area. And I've been having this sort of sensations on and off. But yeah, the first one that I mentioned is pretty much close to what we're talking about today.
Yeah. No, that is so. Bigfoot is just one of many types of what we call cryptids. Cryptid meaning like a crypt from a vault, like secret. In English, we call them cryptids. So. Mm-hmm. So there is also Littlefoot. And the Native Americans describe the Littlefoot beings. And I've read cases of people that have seen these. But there's other types too. There is the so-called dogman, which is like a wolf that can walk on two legs. And it seems to, like what you're saying, just like sort of appear and disappear. It's described in Lukatsky's book, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, again. So I think there are a variety of types of life that we've never talked about until like right now. I mean, I didn't even know about this until very recently myself, even though I spoke to people that had seen Bigfoot. It didn't quite click in my mind how these topics were connected. I couldn't quite, if it's just a undiscovered primate, I didn't quite connect it to these other topics, but it seems to have an interdimensional ability. Mm-hmm. Now, Yvonne, you're mentioning the Navajo Rangers. So one of them is Jonathan Dover, who's talked about this. He's been on some of the podcasts recently. He was on the Martin Willis podcast. And what he described, what you're saying, is not only taking the plaster casts, but the tracks disappear in wet ground. They should keep going.
Yes.
And they start nowhere and they end nowhere. Mm-hmm. That doesn't make any sense. You see other animal tracks keep going. And it's very puzzling. I have to say, I actually worked with the Navajos in college in New Mexico. There was a program in the 80s run out of a university in the Midwest, and they would have you go out, teach English and mathematics to Navajo elders. And I worked with some of these Navajo elders who didn't speak any English. I never saw anything and they never told me anything like that, but I did have contact with them. And so that reservation is very big. And they have the Navajo Rangers who are like law enforcement over this very large area, and they know their territory very well. And they say this is real too. So these are all really interesting questions. And I would say, Bobby, that what you're describing is what other people have experienced. Now, it isn't necessarily common, and the average person doesn't know very much about it. So it's almost very hard to talk about because you bring this up, I bring these topics up at parties and things. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people are kind of defensive. They just say, oh, I don't believe in that, and they don't want to talk about it. They want to shut the conversation off. So not everyone is really open to this. And I think part of it is our own human ego we somehow have been led to believe that we're the
Or-
highest level
or
of
maybe
evolution.
this is
Yeah, we are alone
superstition.
in the universe. Yeah.
What is
of
it,
course.
Ivan?
I said probably it's superstition
That's
because
what people think.
I met, especially with Native Americans, their point of view about this Bigfoot is different from our, because I talk with family, with friends from Farmington, New Mexico, and they told me. I mean, first of all, they don't want to talk about this, but then
They don't want to talk.
we became much more closer, and they start talking about it. I said, "Okay, please tell me what happened." I mean, they saw a Bigfoot, and I mean the whole family, father, mother, and the kids, Bigfoots. And they said lately, and I'm talking about maybe 7 years ago when I spoke with them, they said lately we had a lot of visitations and they coming to us in the neighborhood. They coming, not somewhere in the mountain, they coming to the neighborhood, and they believe, actually the medicine man from this specific area told this friend of me that they coming to make some kind of balance of the energy, something
Yeah,
like this,
right.
to heal or to bring knowledge to the medicine men, how to maybe for some new kind of rituals for healing. So from this point of view of Native American, maybe because of superstition, or maybe I love Native Americans when they start talking, sharing story, they talking very deeply about this. And you can feel that they're true. Even if they believe in some superstitions, they knew that this is real.
Yeah, no, the Native Americans have lots of different beliefs about the Bigfoot creature, the Sasquatch, and a lot of them believe that they are like nature beings that are there to protect the forest or to balance the energy. And I mean, there's a wide range of beliefs, from a kind of a positive view,
right,
to a more negative view, because some of the tribes had hostile encounters with some of them too. It's kind of like people. There are all types of people on the planet.
Mhm.
There seem to be all types of Bigfoot too. It's
Yes.
a wide range. It's not that simple. And our minds like to simplify things, right? We want it to be furry giants that are kind of like your friends out in the forest,
Mhm.
or wild men. It's a wide range of things in our minds. I think, guys, I think the main obstacle is our own boggle point, as they say. The boggle point in your mind is like you go past a certain point and your mind just doesn't accept it anymore. And
I believe this is 100% true. Yeah.
The boggle point. You talk to people and they shut down. I bring this topic up all the time. I've always talked about these things at parties, RV, UFOs. And part of it is I'm interested to see people's reactions. Some people want to say, I had an experience. I want to tell you about my experience. Other people would say, I don't believe it. And they will go on to the internet and try to disprove you right at this. I just went to the internet and I looked it up and it's not true. It's like, okay. And I don't take it personally. It's part of my job, a sociologist too,
Right.
is to see the reactions. It's so interesting. But I have to say, I don't think common sense is always accurate. It was wrong about so many scientific discoveries, magnetism, black holes, meteorites. People didn't believe in meteorites in the 1800s. It was Chladni, the guy I mentioned, who discovered cymatics. He was the one that said they're coming from space. No one believed anything could come from space. If you look at the history of societies and humanity, we've always been behind the reality of what's true. And at the time, everyone doesn't believe things that later, everyone believes in black holes now pretty much. But at the time they thought, even scientists at the time thought impossible. People didn't even believe in Einstein's theory of relativity at the time. There were hundreds of scientists that thought Einstein was a kook, but nobody thinks he's a kook anymore. Why is it any different with these topics?
Yeah, that's something I found true as well. And what you mentioned, the common sense. And when you think about what common sense is basically a point of view that you're having right now. which
Right.
point of view could be, elevated to a whole new level only if you give the chance to learn and then basically to be open-minded about stuff. And it's something that I find more interesting when we're talking about that topic is usually people are experiencing this sort of sensations when they're sort of in a higher frequency, in a higher state of mind, we can say, which is, if we're talking about frequencies in a vibration, starting from fear, anger, which are the lowest, to unconditional love, which is the highest. So yeah, for everyone watching right now, if you want to have more going on around this topic, being able to sense more stuff from the world that is maybe above us, around us, but we're not able to see with our eyes, is basically increase your vibration by thinking in a positive way. That's the simplest way I can say, if you want to experience more of those, because we are all able to. These creatures, if I can label them as creatures, these beings, they're showing us just to prove us that they exist, to elevate our consciousness, to elevate our way of thinking of what reality is. And I believe, ETs are doing the same thing. They're showing themselves just to some people, not to the whole mass society, just to plant the seeds. But we gotta do the work, and this work requires inner work, basically.
Okay, now let's move very slow and quiet to Skinwalker Ranch in Utah.
Yes. So that is, yeah.
You know Buddy from New York,
Yeah.
your friend, and my friend also. He's doing some work for these people over there.
Well, I wasn't aware of that, but I guess it could be true. He doesn't
Yeah.
always tell me everything that he's doing. But
He keep quiet. Have you been ever with your mind in Skinwalker? Just for curiosity.
I've driven by there on occasion, coming back from Salt Lake City to Denver area where I live. I've always, when I go there, I like to stop and look at the landscape and to see, what is it about this place that makes it different? But what I've discovered, Ivan, is there are different Skinwalker ranches around, at least in the US, and I'm sure probably even in Bulgaria or anywhere in the world. There are places where it seems you have more of this sort of energetic activity of
Right.
cryptids and
Yeah.
UFOs. If you talk to people that have lived around Duchesne area of Utah, Vernal, Duchesne, they say that this has been going on a long time. It's not just it's kind of the area.
Right.
That's one area where it happens. And it does seem there's Ted Phillips, who worked with J. Allen Hynek from Project Blue Book. He studied an area in Missouri called Marley Woods. And they had the same phenomena going out there, the orbs, the mutilated cattle,
Yeah.
the strange anti-gravity effects, and all of this. And it's been seen here in Colorado. The people that studied Skinwalker Ranch for the Defense Intelligence Agency, also with Robert Bigelow, who owned Skinwalker Ranch at the time that the OSAP program was in existence. They didn't just go to Skinwalker Ranch. They went to Dulce, New Mexico. They went to the Cascades in Washington State on the east side of the mountains to a ranch there with the same effects. And they went to a area just south east of here of Denver towards Colorado Springs that also had similar activity. So to me, as a scientist, I like to look for the commonalities between these areas. And it does seem that perhaps due to the chemical elements in the soil, the crystallography, or some other feature of the area, it could have to do with the planet as a whole also. That all of these topics that we've been talking about today happen more frequently in certain areas. You could call them portals if you'd like. I talked to people that worked there at Skinwalker for Robert Bigelow way back when I was looking at the crop circles in 2000, 22 years ago. A Canadian researcher that was part of the NIDS team, National Institute of Discovery Science, as it was called back then. He told me, this is before the Defense Intelligence Agency got involved. He told me about seeing a portal, some dark area open on the road, and a creature walk out 7 or 8 feet tall. Maybe it's a Bigfoot. I don't know what it was. He said he saw this with his own eyes through thermal imaging equipment. I don't know if it was a night scope or on the screen. They actually saw this, something just walk out of nothing. Like, Bobby, you're saying you saw this wolf show up?
Yeah.
But that's what they, in case you're not familiar with Skinwalker Ranch, this is what they saw at Skinwalker, is these things, and they saw creatures that we've never even heard of before. There's something called the dino beaver. It looked like a Stegosaurus dinosaur, 300-400 pounds, with a beaver tail. And 2 people saw it walk behind a building. And just like you're saying, Bobby, they went around the building. They said, are we seeing a dinosaur? It's gone. But they both saw the same thing. It's fascinating. And again, what I like about the Skinwalker Ranch topic is, for people that, I don't like to try to force people to believe things they don't want to believe. I don't want to try to convince you. If you get scared by these topics and you say to me, I don't believe it, that means you're not ready to look at this. Fine, that's no problem. But this was paid for by the US government to study Skinwalker Ranch for many years. And we're told it was, it's probably still going on. They're interested in what are the energy forms. It has to do, I'll tell you guys, I'll give you one little clue here of what this has to do with, okay? Anti-gravity. This is why they're so interested. All of the research that was going on from the 1950s at Princeton University, I'm sure till the present, was funded by the US Air Force. And I just have to imagine, I'm not giving away any national secrets because these documents are all redacted. If you look at the studies of ball lightning and so forth, and Skinwalker, and what is still classified, I just can imagine, why would you have the US Air Force? It's because it has to do with anti-gravity, alternative gravitational forms of propulsion. And I think this is why they would be interested in Bigfoot and dogmen and cryptids and the UFOs that you see at Skinwalker, because these are all phenomena that seem to defy gravity. And if you're an organization that is flying things in the air, you would be very interested in alternative forms of propulsion. And this is just one, I'm not saying this is the whole thing. This is one reason why so much of this research, even till today, is still classified from the 1950s. There was a fellow at Princeton called Winston Bostick who was looking at plasmas, very high temperature sort of types of matter. Why would be the same from a galaxy at the huge scale into a test tube? You get the same shapes as galaxies, and the sort of gravitational fields it would create. And then there was one more thing, and then I'll just stop talking about this. John Wheeler, the person that is kind of very famous in, physics for working on gravity and so forth. He also worked on these topics of why energetic shapes could affect gravity. So, this is just one thread of why that goes through this. But I think the interesting thing, guys, is that this is not just some sort of esoteric, metaphysical topic of discussion. This is something that, the military and intelligence agencies throughout the world, I'm sure, it's not just here, why they're interested in these topics, because if they really exist, how do they do what they do, right?
Yeah, if CIA and DOD have interest about this and keep it in secret, that means that is real.
Exactly.
or more of real.
It's real. If they're studying it year after year,
Yeah.
it's real. And in the Soviet Union, you had something similar. I think it was called Thread 3 that Hal Puthoff talked about at one of these conferences that they found out. It was similar type of research. Lots of agencies involved. This is something that's always interested. It just, to me, it should not be kept secret. Why? Because people like Bobby are encountering these creatures. They're out in the woods and something shows up and then it goes away and they don't know how to talk about it. They are afraid to tell other people because maybe people think you're crazy. Yeah. And so you're marginalizing people who've experienced this. To me, it's physics. It's called parallel realities. Right. I don't claim to totally understand how it interacts with ours and what the dynamics, but it's real. All I can say is it's real. And it's, again, it's been studied at least since the 1950s, if not before. And wasn't Nikola Tesla working on similar sorts of things to going back 100 years? So, and other people, not people before Tesla were working on it also.
Yeah. Last January, I was in Peru for 3 weeks doing research for these mummies, which maybe they're extraterrestrial, or maybe some of them is extraterrestrial. And I met with one professor. His name is Roger Zuniga. He's a professor from Ica University, and he's the head of a research of that mummies. And not only about the mummies, I talked with him about all other his projects, not only the mummies. He shared with me a picture, and I'll show you now. I don't know if you can see good.
Yeah, no, I can see. Yeah, sure.
So this is only one of the artifacts he found in the Nazca area. And when I saw this head of alien or whatever, I remember for another picture was sent. No, where is that picture? One moment. Oh, okay, here you go. Another picture, and that head was, the picture of that head was taken in Skinwalker Ranch in Utah.
Oh, really?
Ah.
Well, there's a lot we don't know. That's all we can say.
I see some similarity between this head from Utah and the other head from Peru.
Right. And interesting. You read, and people have been discovering these giant skeletons for a long time throughout the West.
Yeah.
You know, reddish haired giants. It's just that there's a lot we don't know. And we have a lot of work to do, guys, I think it's very exciting. There's a big aspect of our own history. Well, we don't even understand. What's our relationship to the UFOs? Or UAP, is it called? What's our relationship to Bigfoot? We look kind of like them, but we don't look exactly like them. Are we related to them? There are a lot of big questions, and I feel like the science is being held back by the professional societies. I mean, look, I've been reading Science Magazine for 30 years. They don't talk about much of this. They did have an article finally about UAP and the Pentagon's interest in UFOs. Finally, after all these years, it's not, you know, there's a gap between professional science and the data. Right. And it is bridged by classified programs, but that's not good enough. Classified programs do not bring it into the purview of public discussion in any country, We need to have this out in the open. You know, I'm not the only one saying this. You heard Luis Elizondo. He's saying this every week on every podcast that he does an interview with, every interview. It needs to be a public discussion. Right. What is the reality we're living in, or who else is here with us? I think it's very valid questions, and I think it needs to be brought into AAAS, American Association for the Advancement of Science. I mean, it can't just be studying what's going on in test tubes and little tiny micro studies. What's the connection? And someone's got to be looking at this besides the three of us, right?
What about if we are extraterrestrials?
Could be.
I mean, actually, the Bible say that.
Well, we are inhabiting this planet which makes us not extraterrestrials, but earth terrestrials. But something worth mentioning here is that I believe the era of basically having this massive breakthrough in this area is very, very close. Because if we look the bigger picture, what is the pattern of accepting new ideas? First, it's ridiculous, then it's laughed at, and the third stage is being accepted. This is the formula that scientists basically came with. So I believe we are now in the stage somewhere between the first and the second stage, when people don't actually believe it, but they have heard about something. Maybe they're not sure, but there is the interest. There is a thing, right? There are more and more people with abilities that are coming to the world, saying this is who I am, this is what I can do, and they're teaching, they're talking about this, and this is pretty much going to elevate this topic to not just a topic, but being a thing. And I spoke with Ivan. I don't know if you, Dr. Simeon, have heard about Bashar. Have you heard about his? I pretty much believe he's in America. Bashar.
Yeah, sure. I've been following Bashar.
Yeah, you have heard about him. So his story is pretty interesting. His conduct is pretty interesting, and there are many people, and Ivan was surprised that there's actually a big community here in Bulgaria. There are many people that have those sort of sensations, those sort of contacts with the higher world. And there are many people throughout the whole world that are having those. And that's what I'm trying to say, to tell people that this is something not unsimilar to the humankind. This is pretty much how we lived our whole life. Our ancestors, they've been doing it, we're doing it. It's just something that is probably being kept us from the mass world for some reason that I don't really know. But yeah, I believe the era of getting a breakthrough in this area is near to us. Absolutely.
Okay, what we can say for conclusion of this meeting today? Dr.
Well,
Simeon?
thanks for having a very interesting discussion. And these are such fascinating topics. And I agree, Bobby, there's just a bigger story here. Now, it's not just governments that are to blame. I mean, it's all of us. There is a part of us that's afraid to change the story. We've had one story maybe for a couple thousand years. And this is a different story of being a galactic civilization, of recognizing there's other types of intelligent life. I think that's a big step. It's a huge step. Sure. I think for a lot of people, it's kind of scary to go beyond the ordinary story that we grew up around. And we all grew up around pretty much the same way. To another story.
The unknown is always scary.
It can be. And I think the job of those of us who are interested in these topics is to show that it doesn't have to be a negative, scary experience. I mean, I know people that like to skydive. I find that scary, but they find it fun. Mm-hmm. So it's the same thing, right? So
I'm one of those guys.
You're one of those guys who likes to skydive. So it's really a type of, education to say that it is okay to ask the deep questions. We don't live in the age where you're going to be burned at the stake anymore, like in the Middle Ages.
Yeah,
even here in the
back
US,
then, yeah.
It even happened here in the US in the Massachusetts Bay Colony that people were accused of being witches and were drowned. So there was a time when you could be killed for asking the tough questions, but we're not in that time anymore, because I've been asking these questions for 25 years. And no one's told me to stop. So, and if they have, I don't listen to them. So it's, we have a new communication technology that we can add, and we need to make progress on this, because look what's happening on the planet right now in so many different scales. I think we can do better. That's just my gut beliefs. And I think it starts with asking questions, having an intelligent discussion like we did today. So that's my thoughts about it.
Thank you. Bobby, what is your conclusion and final words?
Well, it's something that I already mentioned, but for me, what's the most important thing is what you're going to get out of this conversation, from this topic, for yourself. Because for us to actually evolve and develop in this sort of way as species and as civilizations, the change gotta start from within every one of us, which means the whole wouldn't be a whole if there weren't the individuals. So we need to think about what we can do, us, the individual, we can do to make the progress. And yeah, the progress is very simple. Being the higher frequency and stuff like this from this matter is going to become more and more from part of your life, and you're just going to live with more joy and happiness. That's pretty much my take on this. And yeah, I'm happy to meet you, Dr. Simeon. It was a pleasure to speak with you, and I believe we're going to stay in touch in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, and yeah, we're really happy and appreciate your time to be with us today.
Yes, we'll see you next time, okay? Wow, okay. Okay, I'll play a song I wrote for my dog. It's
Okay.
called Jasper.